Hello Rivals fans, and welcome back to this special mid-season finals edition of the Rivals Report, the show that gets you up to speed on Rivals esports news in a nice bite-sized package. My name is Diatonic, and this is the Rivals Report number 11 for the week of August 11th, 2025. On this week's report, we've got full results and highlights from the recent mid-season finals tournament, the first ever Rivals LAN tournament that just concluded over in Guangzhou, China. And we're also bringing you coverage of the playoffs from the final weekend of NA and EMEA action in the Rivals Ascension League. Well, the first Rivals LAN tournament in history was held over most of last week. The NetEase headquarters in Guangzhou, China acted as the stage for this first international clash. 10 teams from across 5 different regions descended upon China to do battle, and we're here to get you up to speed on what went down in the 2025 Ignite mid-season finals. And what a stage it was there in the NetEase headquarters. An absolutely gorgeous setup that looked like something you'd expect from a multi-year esport, not a freshman one. And certainly not for the first ever LAN tournament in said esport. It wasn't without some technical hiccups and some especially long delays during the first night of competition. But combined with the insane amount of media NetEase was able to create of the teams, the production crew gave it the major esports feel it deserved. Action got underway on Wednesday with the play-in stage. 4 teams from the competing regions did battle to try and punch their tickets to the main stage, with 2 advancing and 2 going home. Nearly 10,000 viewers tuned in on Twitch alone, even at some pretty difficult hours, to watch this first series of matches, and they were in for a show. Envy kicked things off against esports titan Gen G, and from the very first match of the tournament, it was clear that teams were out to prove themselves. Envy practically played with their food before eventually defeating this well-known org, sending them down to the lower bracket extremely early. Nova Esports suffered the same fate in more ways than one at the hands of RAD Esports. Fate himself pulled off an eyebrow-raising quadra kill with the Jeff ult, and both RAD and Envy would move on with 2-0 victories. Gen G would be the first team sent packing, as Nova found a foothold for themselves in the lower bracket and defeated the Korean team 2-0. In the upper bracket, and for the first time in this tournament, NA and EMEA went head-to-head. The night of 2-0s would continue in favor of Envy, but not in a particularly decisive fashion. It was incredibly contested and left a lot on the table to be settled on the main stage, but Envy would be the first to punch their ticket to that main stage. They'd leave RAD in a do-or-die rematch against Nova, one that would again go RAD's way in dominant fashion. They 2-0'd Nova yet again, sending the Chinese team home early and earning their passage to the main stage. Both teams would be in for bloodbaths on the second night of the tournament, however, as Envy would come face-to-face with EMEA powerhouse and one of the tournament favorites, Citadel EU. Envy weren't prepared for Poly's Captain America, who helped carry the former Berber squad to an easy first 2 map wins. Their momentum was completely gone, their backs were against the wall, and they were facing the real possibility of a long road through the lower bracket, but Envy weren't backing down. Not after they'd fought so hard to get here. Envy locked in an entirely unsurprising cap ban starting from map 3, and got much smarter with not only their ban strategy, but their plays as well. Cal struggled on Phoenix in the first couple of maps with several missed ults, but he started getting picks, utilizing Jean Grey's wild splash damage to wipe out Citadel before they even knew what was happening. That all led to an intense map 5, and possibly one of the greatest series of competitive Rivals played thus far. Everything funneled down to an intense 99-99 overtime on Krakoa, but it would be the NA third-seeded Envy taking down the EMEA champs in a huge upset. But the drama didn't end there, as EMEA runners-up RAD Esports went head-to-head with NA champs Sentinels, flipping the script on the previous set with yet another NA and EMEA matchup. RAD once again employed a series of aggressive strategist bans throughout this series, a strat we've seen from them before, but one that Sentinels seemed unprepared to deal with. It wasn't just the bans they got stunned by either. RAD employed a few interesting composition choices that prevented Sen from locking them down. Another series of Captain America plays, along with some other interesting picks like Venom and Jeff, meant that Sentinels were playing catch-up almost all match long. Regardless of the reason, RAD would go on to deliver Sentinels a thrashing here, finishing out 3-0 as the EMEA number 2 seed upsets the NA champs. But for the rest of night 2 of this tournament, 100 Thieves got their heist underway with a big 3-1 win over China Stage 1 champs OUG. The Thieves lost map number 1, but delivered 3 dubs in a row after that, making their map 1 loss look more like a button check than anything else. And in the last match of the night, Champion versus Champion as Asia Stage 1 champs Reject took on the OCE champs Ground Zero. That would end in a 3-1 win favoring GZ as they put OCE on the map in this tournament going into night 3. Night 3 unsurprisingly opened with a mountain of drama. The Champion versus Champion survival match of Citadel versus Sentinels. It's almost unfathomable to think that one of these 2 teams would be eliminated so early, but it was do or die from this point on for both of them. Sentinels stuck to the tried and true strategy of banning Cap against Citadel, once again leveraging Poly's apparent small hero pool and hamstringing the Berber squad right out of the gate. Unfortunately for them, they'd end up on the receiving end as Sentinels took a somewhat contested win on map number 1. Citadel took control of the series as they took us to Araco for map number 2. They put up a fantastic defense against Sentinels, stopping them from even reaching the first checkpoint. Not only did they win on their own map pick, but they also defeated Sentinels on their choice of Hall of Djalia. Sentinels weren't throwing in the towel just yet, clawing their way back to a tied game on Midtown as they even out the series 2-2. Tanuki was an absolute demon on this map once again, slicing and dicing through the Sentinels, but Sin made a miraculous hold near the end of the map to claim it for themselves. It was a scramble to the end, but after a big portal from Techie XD, they were able to wipe out Citadel and stay in the fight. Hell's Heaven would be the stage for the final confrontation between these two teams, a fittingly dramatic finish for a matchup between two teams of this caliber. Fighting for their lives, Citadel decided to take the gloves off as they employed Sentinel's signature team comp against them, the Adam Warlock triple res comp. Tanuki took charge once again on Star-Lord, landing an absolutely insane Galactic Legend overhead near the end of this match. The bodies piled up, the strange portals were flying, but as the dust of battle settled, it was Citadel that would come out on top here, shocking the Rivals world as the NA champs were sent home with an 0-2 record in this tournament. The drama continued in the upper bracket as well, with RAD Esports getting a rematch against Envy after falling victim to the NA team in the play-in stage. But it'd be a tough map 1 for RAD, as Envy took both points on Krakoa to get things rolling in the upper bracket semifinals. It'd be Nero of Envy this time breaking out the Jeff, alongside full sending the Warlock res comp, leaving RAD in a tailspin from the very beginning of this match. RAD would quickly clap back as the battle continued into Midtown, with Melio and Naga able to play Psylocke and Human Torch respectively. Envy would change things up and lean a bit more into dive this time, but thanks to Trust Me's Captain America plays in part, RAD would hold Envy to absolutely 0 checkpoints and put themselves on the board as they advanced to 1-1. Their success would be short-lived though, as Envy took us to Central Park for the third map of the series. RAD played the ult economy well throughout this map, holding Envy to just a single point, but Envy's defense was even stronger. With their backs against the wall, RAD would fall back on their classic quad healer band strategy going into Hall of Djalia. Speedery and Naga would duke it out in the air in the Human Torch mirror match, but it'd again be Speedery coming out as the brighter flame. RAD were stopped just inches away from clearing the map, but even that wouldn't be enough to hold against Envy, and it'd be the NA number 3 seed once again picking up another victory for themselves, continuing their campaign through the upper bracket. Another Stage 1 champion team would be sent home that night in the form of Reject, the Asia champs that would fall victim to number 1 Chinese team OUG. And in the last upper bracket match of the night, 100 Thieves would go head-to-head with the OCE champs Ground Zero. But the Thunder Down Under would be quelled by the Thieves, who put in a dominant 3-0 win and sent GZ down to the lower bracket. That meant for Night 4, we'd have another entry in the saga of matches between two of NA's top teams, 100 Thieves and Envy. These two teams have been trading wins for months, but now with the stakes higher than ever, it was time to finally settle the score between these two teams. A trip to Grand Finals was on the line here, but who would win out? The undefeated Envy that had been collecting wins against every team in their path since the play-in stage? Or the Thieves managed to steal another win for themselves and lock in a top 2 finish? Envy put the Thieves through the ringer in almost every single ban phase in this matchup, constantly banning away Emma and Magneto from TTK, and frequently taking Loki away from Harvey as well. Envy would also employ the Warlock res comp here, a lineup that 100 Thieves has struggled with multiple times in the past. And without banning Emma for Envy, that would leave the front line of the Thieves to struggle, especially considering Envy's insane momentum they'd been building since Night 1. It really just felt like an outright comp difference between the two teams, with Envy having near-endless meta tools at their disposal, while some of 100 T's best players were absolutely crippled by ruthless bans. That big win would put Envy over the edge and guarantee themselves at least a runner-up finish in the first-ever Rivals LAN tournament. But while the last two surviving NA teams battle it out, EMEA was also preparing for a civil war, as Citadel's campaign through lower bracket continued against RAD Esports in the semifinals. Citadel and RAD are both highly respected by fans, and they respect each other. For the most part, RAD focused on hamstringing the Adam Warlock res comp, either banning Adam himself or banning Star-Lord to not only dampen that combo, but keep Tanuki off one of his aces as well. Citadel still tried to utilize Adam's res powers, but it never really gave them enough value outside of map 2. Yes, it would be RAD that would eventually walk away with a 3-1 victory over their EMEA counterparts, leveraging a bit of triple strategist alongside a more traditional 2-2-2 comp. RAD is a far more balanced team than most. There's not one particular star among them, though they all have some big individual moments depending on the game. They're also an incredibly responsive team, always looking for opportunities to change up comps and strategies to keep things moving and prevent their opponents from completing a download on them. That is what's carried RAD so far from out of the play-in stage. Day 5, the final day of competition, featured the final 2 matches of the tournament. The lower bracket finals between RAD and 100 Thieves, and Envy awaiting the winner in grand finals. NA and EMEA fans channeled all their energy into these matches, with the 2 regions jockeying to call themselves the best in the world for the first time ever in Rivals history. But before that, we had to determine who would be facing Envy in the battle for the throne. Aside from their upper bracket finals match against Envy, this may very well have been the Thieves' toughest match throughout the entire tournament. On the other hand, RAD had to face Envy once themselves and also defeated Citadel in a major win the night before. So this raised the question going into this match: were the Thieves really ready? Especially considering that RAD was the last EMEA team standing. They had to be hungry to win it for their home region. It was clear off the rip that RAD were coming into this the far hungrier team, starting with an aggressive rush on Celestial Husk. The Thieves shined on the second point of the map, but with Naga rocking Human Torch and level 1 Crook able to pick up Loki for this first map, RAD were firing on all cylinders and off to an early lead. They continued the momentum by crippling the Thieves in the ban phase on map 2, locking away both NA and Magneto, as well as Luna. They were able to unlock the payload on their offensive run, but when the sides switched, it was all RAD. TTK was able to snag himself a Magneto for map 3, but even that wouldn't be enough to help the Thieves find a foothold here, and the EMEA number 2 seed team would sweep the 100 Thieves. And it all came down to this: the final confrontation between Envy and RAD, the third time these 2 teams battled in this tournament. On paper, this was a straightforward layup for Envy. The NA team had taken 5 maps off of RAD, while RAD had only been able to claim 1 across both series they'd had so far. But they had spent this entire tournament clocking big wins against tough teams, becoming Kingslayers by taking out Citadel. This wasn't the same RAD that Envy had trounced so easily in the earlier stages of the tournament. That much was clear right out of the gate. The EMEA team sent a message on Celestial Husk for map 1, with Trust Me scoring a mind-blowing quadra kill on Venom as soon as the gates opened up. They'd go on to dominate the rest of the map, taking both points and leaving absolutely no doors open for Envy to even get going here. They took the L and moved on to Yggdrasil Path for map number 2. Kalusia's Strange would shine bright here with a big quadra of his own, and Envy would manage to win this one, but they'd need extra rounds to do it. It was an uphill battle for Envy so far in this series, but they were at least managing to get the ball rolling here as they evened out the score. Envy took some big hits in the ban phase for Hall of Djalia, with RAD managing to get some serious damage in on Cal and Speedery before the match had even begun. They took out Torch, Phoenix, Psylocke, and Adam Warlock going into this one. In spite of this, it was an incredibly close game. RAD cleared the map first, then Envy took point on offense as they started in with some insane momentum for themselves. There was a brutal fight near checkpoint 3 in the second half, but RAD would lock in a miracle hold and take the lead back. RAD would mostly keep the same ban strategy into Hell's Heaven for map 4, and again they would pick up a win and finally advance themselves to match point. For the first time in this entire tournament, RAD were in the driver's seat against Envy. There was a tension in the air, the feeling that the tides were turning, and possibly that Envy wouldn't be able to complete a three-peat. We headed to Central Park next, and Envy were able to prevent RAD from clearing the map, leaving the door wide open for them to close this one out. It would take every ounce of effort they had in the tank, but Envy came back from an ace at the very end to hold RAD to just 2 checkpoints, clearing map 5 for themselves and staying alive. Spider Islands was up next as the score moved to 3-2 favoring RAD. RAD would put Envy back on lockdown out of the ban phase once again, but Envy managed to hold them just before reaching the second checkpoint. It was a big opportunity for Envy to dig in and take this series to a map 7, but that opportunity would never come. RAD delivered a huge defensive effort after halftime, holding them by the skin of their teeth and securing their championship dreams. It was a long road for both of these teams, fighting for their lives since the play-in stage, but it would ultimately be RAD overcoming their greatest threat in this tournament to deliver the first ever international win to the EMEA region. Their heads were held high afterwards as they celebrated with their team and claimed the spoils of a victory in China. RAD were a very professional and respectable team from start to finish, avoiding the trash talk and just going out there to do business. For some, certainly a surprise outcome. But for RAD Esports and their tight-knit community, there was only ever one way the mid-season finals would end for them. With a final record of 7-2 overall, RAD ascended to the throne of world champions here and put all other regions and rivals on notice. Marvel Rivals is RAD. Well, an absolutely beautiful, triumphant moment for RAD and for Rivals Esports as a whole. But while the first generation of Ignite competitors reaped the rewards of their early success, the future stars of Rivals Esports were duking it out ahead of a fresh MRC season. Their battleground? The playoffs of Season 2 of the Rivals Ascension League, which wrapped up this past weekend for both NA and EMEA. I was back in the booth with CB this time for the NA Finals, which turned out to be quite the spectacle. Project Blue Lock blazed a path of devastation through the Season 2 preliminaries, taking on all challengers without dropping a single map to anyone. They're a fairly aggressive team that favors early big pushes for objectives to get control and stay in control. They were looking absolutely bulletproof, but they were squaring off with Busy at Work in those grand finals. Busy at Work entered the tournament as the console kings, with the squad having won both the NA Season 1 and Season 2 MRCs over on console. While they'd become a dominant force in the console Rivals ecosystem, they'd find some serious competition on the PC side in the form of Project Blue Lock. Busy at Work got blindsided by those frantic first pushes from Blue Lock, though they'd be able to push back and at least hamstring their momentum to some degree. Blue Lock would jump out ahead early in this series, securing the first 2 maps for themselves thanks to that signature rapid-fire offense. Busy at Work would clap back on Midtown for map 3, a white-knuckle battle to the very end that almost saw Blue Lock sneak away with a 3-0 sweep. But they stayed alive, forcing Project Blue Lock to continue the series to a map 4. But that'd be as far as Busy at Work made it, with Project Blue Lock securing the series and the tournament victory. Blue Lock completes their Ascension League Season 2 run with a perfect 6-0 record, only dropping 1 map to Busy at Work here in the Grand Finals. The EMEA side of the tournament was insanely competitive, with teams like Insomnia, Oblivion, Ascended, Dawncore, and more all vying for the title. But after EXO and Insomnia were knocked out at the last minute, the Grand Finals would come down to EMEA MRC Season 2 third place squad Ascended and Season 2 top 8 team Dawncore. Dawncore were certainly punching up here based on the MRC results, but we've seen them successful in other community tournaments like Engage's Grassroots Weekly. Ascended overcame a great challenge in the finals, defeating Oblivion in a solid 3-1 victory that sent them to Grand Finals. But here, in the Grand Finals of the EMEA Ascension League, they truly met their match in Dawncore. This team dominated the Ascension League as well, and their momentum wasn't stopped in Grand Finals either. They managed to not only take the final series for themselves, but they did it in dominant fashion, winning 3 maps and going home early. There's a very interesting power hierarchy developing at this level of competition among MRC finalists. Third place Ascended were able to defeat the champs in Oblivion, but then Dawncore were able to defeat Ascended, leaving absolutely no doubts about that match. It begs the question, have the MRC standings become inverted now? Either way, it'll be no surprise to see these teams vying for the top spot in the upcoming Season 3 MRC and perhaps in the Ignite Stage 2 Open qualifiers in the very near future. But even as the NA and EMEA Invitationals wrap up, the Ascension League isn't quite finished for the season. The Ascension League's Latin American Invitational is set to begin this coming weekend. We'll be bringing you a few updates from that as well, as 10 teams from Latin America converge to do battle. Well, that's all for this week's Rivals Report. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on the latest in Rivals Esports. And be sure to follow me on other platforms including Twitch, X, and TikTok. And if you're looking to break into Rivals Esports yourself, look no further than Engage. They're an organization that looks to empower esports players through event hosting and production. They're also the minds behind some Rivals community tournaments like the Chronovium Cup and the Rivals Grassroots Weekly. For all things Engage, keep it tuned to their website at engage.gg. I've been Diatonic, you've been amazing, and I'll see you in game.